It's not a Zoom meeting if you don't start on mute, apparently. Welcome, everyone, to the second panel in a series of events leading up to the BFA acting class of 2021 from the Brooklyn College Theater Department and their Professional Industry Showcase. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that Brooklyn College sits on the unceded and traditional territories of the Munsee Lenape and Canarsie First Nations, and I'd also like to acknowledge that Brooklyn sits in Flatbush, which is a predominantly West Indian and Afro-Caribbean contemporary community. Welcome, everyone. We're joined with two very distinguished guests tonight, and we'll be discussing the nuances and the realities of actors entering an industry and having to deal with entering the casting pool and finding and working with representation and negotiating and navigating contracts and all these wonderful professional aspects to our career. I'd like to bring into the space Professor Graham Schmidt, who is our showcase coordinator and will be moderating this conversation.
Thank you so much, Professor Sabangi. Hello, everyone. My name is Graham Schmidt, pronouns he, him, his. I am honored tonight as the showcase coordinator to moderate a conversation between two very distinguished guests. Honored, humbled, excited, and thrilled. The first is Ms. ChiChi Anyanwu, who is a talent manager based in New York City. She founded ChiChi Talent Management after more than a decade working in talent representation here in New York. After discovering her true passion for nurturing and developing aspiring talent, she has developed a roster of clients across media, that is film, television, and theater, that have appeared on stages all over the country and television and film screens all over the world. Welcome, Ms. ChiChi Onyahu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, like guys.
Hey,
how you guys doing?
That's great.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely great. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Colored Water, which just opened, featuring one of your amazing clients, Lauren F. Walker. I hope everybody gets to go see that at the public. It's really an achievement. All right, so our next distinguished guest is Katherine Mckeown, a casting assistant from Rapaport Baldasare Casting. This is an office primarily devoted to television and film. Rapaport Baldasare is one of the most influential casting offices in Los Angeles, and casts such recent programs as Gossip Girl, Riverdale, The Flash, and You. Ms. McKeown's experience in the talent management, the talent representation and casting stretches back over half a decade. Thank you so much for joining us, Katherine. It's great to see you.
Hello, so excited to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So y'all can both stay in the space with me now that we have the conversation started.
Hey.
Amazing. Okay, great. The first question. This is just the topic was selected by our grads: contracts, agents, and representation. And I just want to start with a very simple question that perhaps is on everyone's mind, and I'll start with ChiChi. What makes you notice somebody? How does that process work of going from familiarizing yourself with somebody's work to representing them? And then we'll go to Katherine after that.
Yeah, so with me, I'm a theater nerd, so I see a lot of shows. I'm probably seeing 4 shows this week, maybe 5 shows next week. So I see a lot of talent. So the things that make people stand out to me is just, I think with talent, it's subjective, but I feel like with where I come from in terms of seeing as much theater, I love folks who are, strongly trained in theater, who, go to a good grad program or undergrad program. If they don't necessarily go to, a fancy program, but someone who has solid acting chops and solid theater training. So I definitely look for that as I'm seeing shows, and just looking for someone who just kind of stands out, someone that I also think that I could work hard for and get in for good projects as well. Because sometimes when you do see someone, that might be a little bit more too developmental, I have to make sure that, I have enough resources to, take that time to really develop people who are maybe younger or up and coming talent. So just someone who I'm excited about, basically. That's kind of going to get them to the meeting level at least.
That's great. Can you let me know a little bit more about how, so you notice somebody, how many times do you have to notice them before you decide to kind of to engage them creatively?
It depends on the person. I know even with my client, Lauren F. Walker, who was in Color Water. I've known her for years. I've known her for years. I've been a fan of her work, but I do think also timing is everything. I wasn't necessarily at a company that maybe was bringing in people who were more developmental, who didn't necessarily have, enough credits. So I noticed that, when I made the time to start this company, I really wanted to work with young up and coming talent, or, if I am working with talent who are a little bit more mature, working with folks who are solid, that I can also continue to guide and develop their careers. So with that said, I would just say, it's definitely something that like I look for, that kind of, it's hard to explain. It's almost like that kind of like star factor, that person that makes you kind of want to lean forward. And I know because I do work long hours, it's like, who am I willing to lose sleep over, basically? And sometimes it's the first time I saw them in a play. Sometimes it's the third or fourth time I saw them in a play. It's kind of different with each person, depending on where I'm at in terms of my roster and what I can do.
That's great. Thank you so much. Katherine, what does that make you think about?
Yeah, well, when I think about like noticing somebody, my first thought that kind of came to mind was we're kind of looking, we always have a project going on. So we do look a little bit more specifically than just like a broad kind of it factor. I guess we're looking for very specific things depending on the roles and depending on what's going on. But with that being said, we are always on the lookout kind of for like someone to keep in mind, or someone who will be that kind of like the perfect fit for that role. I remember there was like, and it kind of goes into like, there's no role too small type of thing. Like I remember I was watching like a commercial and I saw someone on there and I was like, that perfectly fit the breakdown that we were looking for, and having so much trouble, finding that role. And so I like went in a deep dive down YouTube trying to like find who that actor was. And so we do that, and we do that kind of work behind the scenes. And yeah, that's kind of like what it made me think of too. And we have the assistants in our office each week when we have like our update meetings, bringing up people that we see in shows, or that we see that kind of are someone that the office isn't as familiar with, because you do kind of start to bring similar people in, or the similar pool there in LA, kind of auditioning all the time and stuff. And so it's anyone who kind of like catches our interest from new shows coming out or anything going on, like we'll put those forward and make sure that everyone in the office is really aware of like this person. And we keep that all in a document that we refer back to anytime we have new roles coming in or things like that. So that's kind of always what we're looking for.
That's great. I wonder, we just had a conversation about this actually just a couple of hours ago. We were visiting. It's about how to make a first impression as an emerging actor, as somebody trying to break in, as somebody who maybe isn't in that bloodstream yet. And I wonder, because you both obviously engage a lot with actors who are at that level, who are emerging, or perhaps even pre-emerging, because you're exploring young talent, not exclusively, but often. Is there anything that you wish that actors knew about how to engage with you, or about just how to present themselves early on, or common mistakes that they might make, or best practices that you wish that everybody did? Anybody, either ChiChi or Katherine, whoever would like to jump in.
I think I don't know, Katherine, I think you have I think I saw your Instagram thing. So sometimes we have personal Instagrams, and sometimes we have business related Instagrams. So me personally, I like folks to kind of reach out to me through my business, or through my website. And I do feel like I get a lot of DMs in my personal site. And honestly, for my personal site, it's really about just kind of promoting art and promoting things I love. It's not really about setting up a general meeting or looking at an acting reel. So just kind of making sure that you're doing research on, the people that you're reaching out to, and just seeing, do they want to be reached out on their personal account, or do they want to be reached out via their website? Because on my website, it has a contact form, So just making sure that you're also making sure that it's not you trying to, slide in someone's DMs that maybe you don't necessarily have a connection to, that you haven't met in real life. But it's like how to also make sure that you, keep that professionalism, or even with Facebook too. I usually don't really add people that I don't really know in real life on Facebook, like I used to do back in the day, but then you get crazy people who are sending you messages. So now I have to actually know the people. So I'd much rather someone hopefully meet me in real life, as opposed to like you're trying to add all these interesting people that you don't really know because you're trying to have them, look at your work. So just kind of like knowing what the boundaries are for whoever you're in contact with, I think might be helpful.
Yeah, that definitely makes like a lot of sense. I think that I just have my personal Instagram and I never mind at all if like anyone reaches out, especially if it's something specific. If they're like, hey, I saw this breakdown come out, I saw that your office is doing it and I'm not represented. We love that. Like we love to hear from people. And that's definitely, I don't think overreaching at all. And I think, but to also kind of understand the boundary of it too, that if I don't have a role for you, or if it's not the right fit or something like that, then not to kind of continue reaching out type of thing at the moment for that one role. Because we have like an open call a couple times happening, or we just did one. And, sometimes people reach out a bunch or back to back to back. And if it's not the right fit, then, that's kind of all we can do, so.
Right. So learning to read some social cues and go through proper channels and try to be where you both are professionally. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, go ahead, Catherine.
I was going to also say, it just also reminded me too of, since this world that we're living in right now is so Zoom heavy, kind of Zoom etiquettes as well. Everyone's so lovely on the Zoom when they introduce themselves. And but we have, everyone has to interact with our producers, or anytime we bring them in for callbacks or anything like that, or if they're doing a Kim read with the other actors. I think we have had instances in the past where someone came in and maybe didn't come across great on Zoom or something like that, or I don't know, sometimes it's different than in the room than on Zoom. And so that's something to keep in mind kind of going forward. Most Kim reads, most callbacks are all going to be on Zoom, kind of even going forward. I don't know how much we're going to be doing in person auditions really moving forward. So that's just something to keep in mind too, to kind of, this isn't really a phase. It's something that probably will be happening for a while. So just to keep in mind.
Yeah. Well, this class in particular has built up enormous skill with Zoom, having, I think, obviously it was, they were juniors in college when everything was upended, and finished their training remotely. So a class that is well schooled on Zoom etiquette. I'm glad that was lifted out. That's awesome. Here's a question. I wonder, and this in some ways bears on the way that the industry has changed in recent years. One, I think just the industry is film, theater, TV have all been in various states of disrepair and have been damaged, obviously, by the pandemic and overlapping social, economic, health crises. I wonder sometimes, but I think that sometimes there's a lot of work when people expect that there maybe is like no work to be had. Are there any places in these industries where where you see opportunities where people can actually be aiming their efforts, even though obviously it's a really hard time to be a theater artist right now. It's a really difficult time to be a performing artist.
Yeah, I'm not in the theater realm, but coming from the TV side of it, it seems like everything is kind of getting back up and running, and almost more so since the pandemic, since so many subscribers to all of these streaming sites has increased. We're seeing more and more and more opportunities for actors, and more opening roles, more shows. Where pilot season's kind of changing anyway now too. We've been doing pilots all year long. So in my experience from our office, we are always working on new projects, not just recurring. So I feel like there's a lot, actually, we're pretty hopeful on our end that there's a lot of opportunities. And again, with so many shows happening, more and more roles. So it's kind of a good time, I would say, honestly.
I will just add to that in terms of like maybe networking and getting your work out there. I've been seeing a lot of people do reading for cast directors, or I did a thing called one-on-one. Basically, I would be in a room for 2 hours and meet different actors who would do scenes. So all the people who were readers, they were all actors. So I actually got a chance to actually know some of my readers in the past. And like some people are like, oh, you're a really good reader. I got to keep a tab on you, So that's another good way to kind of get your name out there. See if you can sign up for these one-on-one program and sign up to be a reader. If you have a relationship with any cast directors, see if they ever need readers. I'm not sure how it is in terms of television. I know with theater cast directors, they always are looking for readers sometimes. So reach out to folks and let them know that you're available. I know some people pay, some people don't, but even if you want to volunteer your time to be a reader, that might be helpful to kind of get your work out there with folks. And then also, social media is definitely a way to also kind of network. There's so many different actor groups on social media. There are times where you can also, volunteer to read a new play by up and coming playwrights, or do these Zoom. I feel like I went to 10 million Zoom readings during the pandemic, so there's just so many things that you could be doing to just be active as you're, of course, waiting for the audition. Like, make sure that you're going on social media, you're meeting up and coming writers, and you're getting a chance to read work and to really network with folks. Because sometimes things are also going to people who are kind of already known in the community. If someone's casting a reading real quick, they're probably going to go to the list of actors that they already know, that they've worked with before, or maybe they used in the past for projects. So definitely still making sure that you're putting yourself out there and trying to meet folks and then network might be helpful. Yeah.
That's great. And I know we have a number of students in this class who are, one of the points of our pedagogical goals at Brooklyn College is try to encourage artists to be, we had last year, a similar panel, we had Victor Vasquez, who founded X Casting NYC, who's fantastic. But he called it trying to be your own center of gravity. Even when you're not working, you're still generating art and have a creative practice that attracts attention on its own right. I wonder, how does that factor into? Sometimes it feels like the only thing that's going to get seen are audition tapes. But you're obviously both literate on social media, more than literate on social media. Are these things, do these things help people get representation and help them get cast if they're out like on YouTube as like a content generator?
Oh yeah, I just made a whole list from TikTok people that I found for something specific. I was just going through TikTok and like finding people. So that's definitely the case. And I was actually going to say too, piggybacking off of social, how popular open calls are now. I've done 3 open calls this year, and I had never done one before. Just with everything being self-tapes and we haven't gone back into the office yet for for any project. So just always kind of keeping a lookout for things like that. We're posting them on our socials anytime we have them. We have one coming up soon, so like keep a lookout for that too for anyone. So things like that.
What's an open call?
So pretty much like we'll just put the breakdown out, and we'll put a link, and then a link to the sides and everything. And it's pretty much anyone that wants to audition can audition and upload it to the link, and we'll watch all tapes, and we'll be sending them to our team and stuff. So it's, and it's not like a line, because I know that people talked about how in the past, you have to go and like wait for an open call and things. This is just, sides are just up online, and so anyone can audition, represented or not. So we've had a lot of those going on.
Also, just a note, I think it might be, I'm not sure if you guys talked about software and resources. I think every actor needs to be signed up for Actors Access and a casted account, casted networks. You could also be doing a lot of self-submissions during this time. Especially if you're doing the open calls. I feel like a lot of the open call links have been via casted or via Actors Access. Yes. So definitely work on getting your profile before you graduate.
Yeah, almost every time we release the breakdown, we release it to the represented or to the reps, and then also on Actors Access. So definitely, and it's free. So
that's great. We actually, Patrick and I and Paul Davis, who's our colleague here with Davis Gallery Casting. In any case, just took a workshop about breakdown services, which organizes showcases using Actors Access profiles. So our students are going to be making their Actors Access profiles pristine, and hopefully they'll be coming across both y'all's desks. This is what a great conversation. Here's a question. This just came up because you talked, Katherine, about casting people with or without representation. How important, like sometimes we get the sense that you need representation to get any work. How true on a scale of 1 to 10 is that statement? Like, how important is it to have representation in order to generate opportunities for yourself?
It's a good question. It's changing so much right now. I think with everything being so online. In the past, we would schedule and we'd bring people in like physically into the office to read. So it was usually through submissions, through agents that we knew, or through our covering agents at all the major agencies or managers who'd reached out. And that's kind of the basis to how we would bring people in. But now when we have self-tapes just coming in all the time and from Actors Access and things like that, it's changing. So I don't know if I have like a concrete answer there. I haven't experienced where an actor themselves has, I guess, negotiated. So at some point during the process, they either have a manager or they have someone. But if we have read a lot of people from open calls or from Actors Access, so it wasn't that it was their reps necessarily that submitted them. So it's just kind of case by case. I don't know. It's just changing a lot. But I don't know if that answered your question. But
deliberately open-ended.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like there's always a sense of like, gosh, I want to close with this representative. I really would like somebody to be working on my behalf. I guess the next question is related, but it's for ChiChi. What is, because it feels like, oh, once I have an agent, now somebody is out there hustling for me and I don't have to hustle as much. That's actually not what happens, right? Like what's that relationship like in terms of like, okay, if I'm represented, how much work do you expect me to be doing versus what you're doing on top of it? What are those two spheres?
Well, I think even with me, I have a lot of clients who I share them with agents. Okay. So I know some managers are a little bit more different, but I love to focus on terms of like branding, in terms of like getting your materials together and talk about what your career goals are and what are the steps that we're going to take to make your career goals happen. So I'm a problem solver. So that's kind of why I got into management to begin with. I worked at an agency. It was fun, but I didn't like the fact I had so many clients and it felt really about the money. Like I'm someone who of course we all want to make money and support ourselves, but I haven't really been driven by money. Like I get driven by talent and helping people and nurturing folks and getting people to where they need to get to. So when I do work with agents, we're both bringing in auditions, I would say. But in terms of working hand in hand with the client, there are clients who are just very proactive. They're still networking. They're getting auditions on their own. They're always updating their materials. Some people, are a little bit more tech savvy. So they're always kind of like editing the reel or shooting scenes with their friends and getting a great camera and, putting together these amazing reels before they're even booking work because they just want to make sure they have the material for casting directors. So I do think it's still great for, when you do have an agent manager, or let's say you have an agent, I think you should still be working hard. I definitely want clients who are going to be working as hard as I am. I'm only getting 10% as a manager. Some managers take 15%. The shady ones take 20%, stay away from them. But, we're only getting a small percentage, but I do think that other 90% of the work is supposed to be on you. So you really should be, taking the lead in your career. And we're kind of just here to kind of help support and guide you at the end of the day. So it's not going to stop. It's not going to be like, I got an agent manager, I'm good. Like, nope, you still got to work hard. You still got to make sure that you're putting yourself out there the same way that we're doing that.
This is great. And I might be a really good interlocutor for this conversation because I'm a director by training. And I actually, in some ways, I'm learning a lot about the acting industry by teaching actors and then hanging out with Patrick all the time. But here's a question, because you just pointed something that I think I fudged because I referred to what you do as being an agent when you're in fact a manager. Can you talk about the importance of like the relative importance of each, or what you would, what an emerging actor might want first, or what traditionally comes first between, agent, manager, lawyer, those members of your team?
Well, I do think I love working with agents. I do like working in a team. A lot of times, with agents, at least the really good agents, they're really strong when it comes to negotiating contracts. Some agents have went to law school. I come from a creative background. So for the most part, the agent will usually take the lead in terms of negotiating the contracts. Or if it's, let's say, something that's like a series regular test, we usually will get an entertainment lawyer on board so we can make sure we get the best negotiated deal for the client. So at the end of the day, I do think it's good to have that team, but you do have to figure out also what you want. Some people, they don't really care about having a personal relationship with their team. They just like, get me out to as many auditions as possible. That's all I need from you, But with me, because I'm more about the personal management and I'm about, well, how do we make sure that, the package, which is the headshot, the resume, the acting reel, or some people have websites, how do we make sure that this best reflects the work that we're submitting you for and the work that you want to do? So I'm really more about kind of that overall kind of like long-term career goals. So that's how I work as a manager. And then it does feel like sometimes the agents are very more focused in terms of like trying to get as much money as possible. It's more kind of, the short-term things as opposed to like, I kind of want to see that bigger picture as opposed to kind of like the easy money gigs where some people might be after. So I think with you as an actor, if you want someone who's more about kind of like nurturing you and making sure that you have this great resource after you graduate school, and if you're someone who also needs more guidance in terms of picking headshots, help on social media, help on branding, that's kind of what managers do. And then agents are more so focused in terms of negotiating the contracts and getting auditions. So hopefully that makes sense.
Extremely illuminating and thoughtful answer. Thank you so much. We have just barreled through these questions that I had prepared. I feel like now would be a great time to invite everyone else into the space. You're welcome to turn on your cameras and join us. We're making record time here, but this has been just a super invigorating, thoughtful conversation. Does anybody have a question that is burning for either ChiChi or Katherine? All right, Jeremy, fire away.
Again, thank you guys so much for being here. This has been super enlightening. So Katherine, what you were saying earlier about how with the landscape changing, instead of actors coming in to read as much, it's more just like self-tape, EcoCast, Actors Access for the most part. Would you say there's any like don't do's for that? Like you see a self-tape and you're like, okay, that is something that you should not do, any type of, consistent things, or if there's any things that you should be doing to showcase more of yourself since you're not in the same space as the casting director?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's one thing definitely to do is please everyone remember to slate. That's really, really helpful for us. It's really why we love to, know where you're based, because it's so important right now, especially like there's so many COVID restrictions still in place depending on where we're shooting. And so that's really, really helpful. Let us know those sorts of things. Anything that's like requested in the slate, just make sure, please, because like there's a reason we request it for our notes and stuff. So that would be great. And then it's always fun too if you show your a little bit of your personality in the slate. Like you don't have to do anything crazy, but just like that is kind of your place to be, yourself and to stand out. And does, again, not, you don't have to run with it. It doesn't have to be like anything, wild, but just that's kind of like your space too. And as far as self-tapes, I would say options is never a bad thing. We don't mind multiple takes. Please don't send in like 3 takes of each scene. But if there's like 2 strong takes, you think, then it's never bad. We will review all of them and kind of pick our favorite ones. That's never a bad thing. Props aren't as necessary, I think, as people think that they are. Props or costumes. If you have a good team on board, like they can kind of visualize it. If you can become the character, sometimes people go a little bit overboard and it's distracting. So I would say keep it to a minimum. That doesn't mean nothing. If you want to transform a little bit into a character, that's completely fine. I just think sometimes it can be distracting. We've found that in any sort of some of our like superhero shows or things like that, we will kind of go to the extreme and it's almost pulls people out of it. So that's kind of what I would say, is it don't.
Thank you.
Great. More questions? Alan, go ahead.
I just have one question. My name, I already introduced myself. I was going to introduce myself again. I'm sorry. This is a question for both ChiChi and Katherine. How should an international artist or an undocumented artist navigate the industry? Should they be submitting things? Would you recommend undocumented and international students to be sending in self-tapes, resumes, those type of things? Like, because of course, there's the legal side to those issues where it comes to like contracts and stuff like that, and then they wouldn't be able to do the show because of certain requirements. So what would be your advice on that?
Is this for you, Alan?
This is for me and other people that I know that that are kind of in that situation.
So I guess it depends on what kind of visa you have. I did recently work with someone who was on an O1 visa, not O1, an off visa, he graduated from grad school. So the tricky thing about that is he was very close to booking the tour of Hamilton, but by the time that his visa expired, it wouldn't qualify for him to do this tour. So you do have to make sure that, like, especially the time after you graduate, I would, of course, hire a really good lawyer, because if you could also, I think it's switching to O1 visa is probably a little bit better than staying on the student visa, because I believe the student visa is it's a limited amount of time. Like I had a client who had an O1 visa, but it was, I believe it was for 2 years. So I was able to kind of book him some really great tours. He was on Jesus Christ Superstar tour for a little bit. He went to London. So I was still able to book him some really great work. Of course, his goal is to get his green card. But in the meantime, before he, put together his green card application, you want to book as much work as possible, because the idea of the green card is really about, you kind of have to show that you're an exceptional talent. It's no surprise that when you see a British actor on television, it's literally like the best talent that London has, in a way, right? Because it's hard to kind of be mediocre and work in America, and it's super competitive. So you do have to build your credit so you can, of course, get the O1 visa and get the green card going. So the sooner that you could also hire a lawyer, and also maybe try to build, you can also build some non-union credits. In the meantime, maybe build some non-union film credits. You can build some non-union theater. But in terms of you doing the union, it is tricky. There are some producers who are very, they're just a bit more anal retentive than others. Like the producer has to really like you to get you into the production. Because I've seen people who've come over from Australia and they're in Aladdin or they're in a Lion King, but like it really has to be a producer who's going to, fight for you to be in the production, because sometimes Actors Equity can make it harder to cast international folks because their goal is to honestly get as much American actors work. So I think the sooner you can hire the lawyer, the sooner that you can also build your credits. I think it'll hopefully help the process be a little bit easier. But of course, the chops, making sure your acting chops is where it needs to be, because if you're not booking work, it's just going to be hard for you to, get into some of these television shows and theater productions, because some people don't want to also deal with the paperwork. It's also a lot of paperwork when you're also casting someone who's international too. So that's also that too. Katherine, I'm sure you guys hired international folks before, right?
All the time. Yeah, I was going to say, I've only had one show this year that films in the United States. Most things we work on film in Vancouver. We're working on a show right now that's going to shoot in South Korea. We have people kind of looking, filming all over the place. So it's not always, you don't always have to have a green card or anything, because a lot of our shows are filming all over the place. I can't speak to local casting as much. Like if you were trying to be hired as a local in Atlanta or something like that, like I can't speak to that as much, but there's a lot of options. And that is, like you were saying, more for series regular roles. They're willing to, we cast far enough out where as long as anyone's honest about that, as long as we know that going into it, then they will work on visas. And that we've done that plenty of times, that they've done visas, and even through COVID and all that kind of stuff. So it's not impossible by any means.
And to get more specific on the notion of undocumentation, and this can be for Katherine, because you should, I don't know if it could be also be for ChiChi, but should undocumented people be submitting things knowing they probably wouldn't end up for the role?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would say if you've been requested, please do. Just again, be upfront about it. If it's in the slate, if we record, if that's part of the information, if it says, because during COVID, we had a couple of issues just because there wasn't time and like visa offices were closed and things like that. So it's changing. That's changing and getting easier now. But just be upfront about it is what I would say. Put it in your slate or something like that. Because if they know, if we present it and like we're like, by the way, like we'll have to get a visa or something like that, usually the team will be on board and things, especially again for series regular roles. So absolutely keep submitting.
Thank you both, and thanks, Alan, for that question. Patrick, fire away.
I have a question about maintenance. So, we keep hearing that this is a long-term commitment, right? We have to commit to this career, and everyone we meet, every new contact we make in the industry, we're going to have to kind of maintain that relationship. So do you have any tips or insights on, in the two phases of finding representation or building a relationship with casting, where you're just trying to get them to know you, you're trying to get to know them, and if you do end up being represented, or you do end up making a meaningful connection with the casting office, do you have any recommendations about how to maintain those relationships over time?
Yeah, I think earlier TG said about readers, like we have a whole list of readers that we'll bring in for table reads, for auditions. If we don't have anyone in the office that we feel like can read with them, that's definitely an amazing way to keep those relationships going. And it is harder now since we're not bringing people in as much, because it used to be, someone comes in and kills an audition and we will remember them, forever. For every role we'll be bringing them in. It's a little bit harder now. We are still bringing tons of people into Zooms and stuff, so we will meet them that way. I would say setting up generals. We do a lot of general meetings, and just kind of like get to know people. If you usually reps will reach out to us to schedule those, but if you get represented, kind of to push your reps to reach out to certain offices that you like, or if you like those projects, to set up a general. I think that's a great way to kind of get in there and get the foot in.
I feel like I had something to say, but then I forgot. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question again? Sorry about that.
Yeah. So, on Saturday you watch these fine young actors showcase, and you fall in love with all of them, and you sign them all. And then fast forward 3 years, someone was off working elsewhere, or their focus has gone somewhere else. But over the course of the 2-3 years that you've been working together, how do they maintain that relationship? How do they, renew interest if someone gets distracted and comes back? It's a long-term career. It's a long-term commitment. So how do we maintain that over time?
I would say invite me to stuff. I see so much theater. Like if you're in a play, if you're in a reading, if I have time, I will check it out, because I'm always trying to discover new people. I just genuinely love going to theater too. So, invite me to a show, or if you have a screening coming up, invite me to a screening. Sometimes I'll bring my other industry friends to stuff too as well. We have a whole network of managers and agents and casting folks, and I'll take an industry friend with me. A couple of times I'll take a manager friend or agent friend, and they'll take meetings with people because I took them to this really great play and they saw this actor. So that happens too, because I understand with me as a manager, I tend to keep my roster kind of small. If I come across someone who's really great that I see in a show, I'll recommend him or her or them to a friend. I've done that in the past. I've actually gotten people who maybe I couldn't take on because I have a handful of folks. But I recommend people to agents and managers in the past, or even to casting director friends. I had a friend who was having trouble casting this role in a show. I was like, oh, you know what? I saw this one play. There's a few actors who might be good for it, So I've definitely recommended actors before in the past, who I've seen, who have reached out to me. I had an actor who volunteered to also be a reader for auditions. Like, oh, so, I'm not representing you, but you want to keep in touch and you want to help my clients and be a reader at auditions too. So I think it is also great to see how you can also be of service. I think sometimes it's like we're always constantly like having people ask us for something, which is fine. I get it. It's part of the industry. But if you can also like offer some type of service as you're reaching out, I think that's definitely helpful. Or even like volunteer. In the past, I had I think I hosted an event, and there was an actor who just like, let me know if you ever need volunteers for anything. Like, oh, let me send you an email. You tell me, I need a volunteer for this event, So just like generally reach out, let us know what you're working on, keep in touch. You don't have to email us every single week, but maybe like a monthly or bi-monthly check-in. Some people are a little more accessible than others. I tend to be very accessible. My sister's an actress. Most of my friends are actors, so I get it. But the wrong agent or manager might not necessarily want to be bothered. So also just know what your boundaries are with whoever you're reaching out to. Some people are fine with the constant check, and some people aren't. So just make sure you're kind of getting a feel of each person's temperature. So.
Fantastic. This continues to be fantastic. More questions? Yeah, Fran.
Yeah, so I see that a lot of casting posts right now say like the character is like ethnically ambiguous, which like I think is great and is more open and inclusive. But let's say like I really am interested in a role that they're specifically looking for a white actor to play. How appropriate is it for me to submit myself for that? Like how likely is my audition going to be viewed? Like what is the boundaries on that?
I would say it's always safe to submit if it's open, or I guess if it's something specific, there's a reason it's in there. It goes through a lot of approval process for those breakdowns to go out. So it's something that they're specifically looking for, and there is a reason for it. but sometimes roles open up, you never know. And so if we have those in the submissions, we won't ask you to tape if we don't think that you could be right for it. So you can always submit, especially through Actors Access, you can always submit yourself. But if we don't request a tape, there's probably a reason. And then as far as open calls, if it's specific on there, there's probably a reason for it again. So it might be seen, but I don't know how far, a tape would go. So that's kind of, but yeah, but please always submit, because again, roles could change and we'll go back through our breakdowns and everything, and we'll go back all the way through and do a whole nother round, so.
Also, I just want to add in my 2 cents. I did have a client who, I don't know what it is, something about it that made me feel uncomfortable. And I remember she talked about being okay being submitted for like Latinx roles, and she's not Latinx at all. So I don't know. I do think that we're in a time right now that I do think representation is important, whether it's white, whether it's Middle Eastern, whether it's Asian. So, I think sometimes it is good to be culturally specific when you're doing submissions. It makes me feel uncomfortable submitting my Middle Eastern client for a Latinx role because she looks Latinx, I don't know. That's just my personal thing. I do understand with actors, we all want to play all different kinds of roles, but I don't know, something about that kind of rubs me the wrong way. So.
No, that's a great point. Yes, going in that direction. Sometimes, and that's kind of what I mean. If it says something specific on there, there's a reason that role, that's on the breakdown, so that it's, whatever people are comfortable with and feel like they can accurately play.
Yeah, thank you.
Patrick, please.
Just to just drill down on that just a little bit. Where can that conversation begin? So if we do get a breakdown that's maybe culturally specific, but we see an angle on it that seems viable, or if it's open and we want to offer something unique about our heritage, and it says that they're South Asian, but I can make a case for it being a North African character, or if it's written as a general, sorry, welcome to Brooklyn. If it's written as open ethnicity, and I want to inject some heritage in there, an accent or something specific in the character, do I have that conversation with my management? Do I just submit various takes? Do I try to get the question to casting for it to come back down to me? Or how can I try to contribute creatively to the take? Do I just do it, or is there a conversation to be had there before I book it?
It's a good question. I would say, so on your Actors Access profile, you have a section where you're able to put what you feel you can, like what you can accurately play. So I check those when we're going through submissions when we have a specific breakdown. So that's very important, I would say, for you when you're making your profile, to what you feel you are comfortable saying you will play, if like that was to follow through. And then I guess creatively, even we don't have much say when it comes to creatively swaying the role. And if the team specifically picked, or specifically wrote a role one way, I don't know how helpful that would be to tape and then try to get your manager to talk to casting, to talk to producers. But it's always case by case. I think that's what's hard, is it's always just so that's specific, and I think that, I don't know, it's just case by case when it comes to every role,
And ChiChi, do you field creative questions from your actors? Like, do they ever say, hey, do you think I should try an accent or dialect, or is that outside of your purview?
Sorry, I'm on mute, sorry. So I like taking those type of questions, because I don't know, there's something about, I guess, the world that we're living in now. At the end of the day, I think people want to be represented. I'm not sure if there's just been so much controversy in terms of In the Heights, there was a whole thing about colorism, and about, you were specifically talking about, Dominicans living in the Heights, and why is everyone very light skinned, So at the end of the day, are there folks who, are light skinned, yes, but there's also folks who look like me that are Dominican, right? So I do think I'm open to having these conversations because I get that it's also like a rainbow within ethnicity. Although I am dark skinned, I have cousins who have blue eyes. I have cousins who have very fair skin, who have very curly hair. So the world honestly is kind of like a rainbow. We're all kind of mixed with everything. But at the end of the day, you do have to make sure that you can also do whatever culture that you're going in for justice. So if you are someone who you're trying to pass as Latino, do you understand the language? Have you been to any Latin American countries? You know, I had one client in the past who was Portuguese, and he was obsessed with West Side Story, right? He wanted to go on for West Side Story, but they specifically said that they wanted Puerto Rican actors. They were going to Puerto Rican actors first, and then they were going to go to everyone else. Like he, you know, he speaks Portuguese, he speaks Spanish, but at the end of the day, producers really wanted to see Puerto Ricans first. And I think someone who's also Portuguese, that's a whole different ethnic group, right? You know, he technically also is kind of like white passing as well, right? So I had that conversation with him. And also it can also be a bit of an uncomfortable conversation too, because at the end of the day, I get you're an actor, so you want to play all different kinds of roles. You want to play roles that don't look like you. You want to play roles that are meant for people who look like this. You know, I get it. You want to explore, you want to play, but then also, are you doing that culture justice? Are you doing your research? You know, are you understanding that there's just so many things that go on within that culture? Are you going to be able to relate to that and also, you know, tell it in the best way? A couple of times I had clients turn down auditions because it's like, oh, you know, I can't tell that story. It's like, I am someone who identifies as straight, and that needs to go to like one of my queer brothers and sisters, you know? So we have those kind of conversations, you know, in terms of like, you know, although you're an actor, you could play the part, but like, should that go to you, right? Does that, as opposed to all the actors who may be able to tell that as truthful as possible. So definitely a conversation I have with my actors all the time. And I think you should feel open to also have that conversation. You know, I think in the past, you know, I know some actor friends who can't have that conversation with their agent or manager for whatever reason, you know? So whoever you do end up working with, make sure you can have those type of like hard questions about like, hey, I feel comfortable doing this, or I don't feel comfortable going in for this kind of role, or I'm going in for this stereotype. So that's definitely something that like we try to fill those type of questions and concerns, yeah, with clients.
That's great. Oh, thank you so much. Certainly something that we hold a lot of conversations about at Brooklyn College. Noah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Graham. Yeah, so my question is more about, you know, when I think about when I assess what I have to connect with people who are further down the line in the industry with, I look at like, I have my work, I have my reels and tapes and such, and then I have like me and who I am. And my question is sort of, how much do those sort of two things, what do you tend to gravitate more towards when you're assessing an actor? You know, do you jump right to what kind of work are they producing? What can I see them do? What does their, you know, reel look like, or their headshots look like? Or do you tend to take a more like person forward sort of, you know, do I connect with this person? Are they grounded? Like, do we vibe kind of thing?
Yeah, I think with me personally, I think the first thing I see is, of course, if you're sending me an email, I don't necessarily know you. I think the headshot, I don't know, there's something about the head. I guess I'm old school in that way. I think it's important to have a really strong headshot that not only captures your essence, but captures the kind of roles that you want to play as well. So I look for folks who have really amazing headshots. I kind of, you know, if I'm going through 50 emails of submissions, what are the shots that are going to stand out? And then of course I'm looking at the work, I'm looking at the resume. But I do think that that initial headshot, if I'm kind of drawn to the picture, it's definitely something that I think, you know, if I'm passing on to Katherine, you know, I think they also will say that like they're looking at some really strong headshots too, you know, because I've heard of people also getting like typed out. I'm not sure if you guys do that, Katherine, in terms of typing folks out based on their headshot.
Well, we go through, yeah, when we go through the submissions and breakdowns, I'm looking for very specific things. We have submissions for, you know, we get 8,000 submissions for a role or something. So I'm going through, and that's the only thing I'm really, I mean, the headshot is absolutely what's grabbing us. I mean, I look through everything else too, but if we're moving quickly and stuff, yes, headshot's very important. Mhm.
Yeah, and then, along with the headshot, it's the resume, the acting reel. I don't know, for some reason, there's something about folks who's like, oh, I have to book work, so I can't get together and act. And we're like, no, like literally get a friend with a camera, get your fancy overpriced iPhone and like put some scenes together, and have a nice a solid background, and just put together some scenes on your own. Like, I think it's better than nothing. I think a lot of times people want to go to these fancy services and pay $500 to $1,000 and, get these scenes together, but like get a dope, strong acting scene and get some good lighting, and you can literally kind of just do it on your own too. So if you can really start to put together some of your acting scenes before you graduate, I think that's going to be super helpful in terms of like, if you're submitting to me, I just really want to see what you can do. I want to see what you look like on camera, so getting those scenes together is great. And of course, when we get to the meeting phase, it's really personality. Me personally, if I don't necessarily vibe with you as a human being, I'm probably not going to work with you. Even if you're talented, I've had meetings with actors that I love their work, but personality wise, I can't connect with them for whatever reason. I do think sometimes it's almost like dating. Like you're getting to know the person, you're getting to know if the chemistry is there, and if the chemistry is off, then it's like, oh, I can't necessarily champion your career because I'm going to be literally working almost every single day for your career. If I don't necessarily like you, it's not going to work out. So I definitely think that like kind of basic human chemistry has to be there, But then again, I've met some agents that are literally dry as paint, but for whatever reason, clients don't care that they're dry as paint, and clients will work with them because, of course, they have great clients and have great connections. So it just really depends also with you as an actor too. You also have agency. So if you are not feeling the agent, if you're not feeling the manager, make sure that you're also getting a feel of like, who do you think is going to be in your corner? Who do you think is going to, fight hard for you? I remember my sister had met with 4 of the top agents in the industry. She had a really great premiere of her play, and she was leaning towards, it's so interesting. She was leaning towards a woman who I think they cried together. They cried together. They just kind of connected about grief and loss. And that's who she was going to go with because she wanted to have that personal connection. But then she thought about, hold on, this is one of the top agencies in the world. I know that I vibe with this woman better, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure that my career is going to be where it needs to be at. So she actually went with the agency that was just going to do better for her career-wise, opposed to the human connection. So there's also part of that, who's going to be hustling for you, who's going to be working harder for you, and maybe you won't have that personal relationship with your agent or your manager. So it's also about what do you want as an artist? Do you just kind of want to be a star? Okay, I'm going to go with someone that's going to make me a star, and we don't have to be friends, right? So also think about that in terms of who you want to work with, who do you want to communicate with every day too. So.
This is fantastic. I'm just going to name people that haven't asked a question yet, not to force you to, but Izzy, Karuchi, Kyla, what's on your mind?
And I'll do one. Thank you, Graham. This is kind of going back to what we talked about before, Jeremy sort of touched on it, but we were always talking about now being on Zoom. And is there anything now that you guys look for in a Zoom audition or a Zoom interview that maybe you weren't looking for in the room, whether it's to our advantage or to our disadvantage?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think kind of what we were talking about earlier, where it's harder to come across. I feel like in the room, it was so nice. You could come in and there's a lot more time to mingle. There's a lot more time to kind of let your personality come across. But with the Zoom, there just really isn't. I'm letting people in from the waiting room, say hi, we chat for a little bit. Everyone's still very, very kind. And it's always a warm room. Everyone's a fan, when you come in. So just always know that. But it's just, that does make it trickier. So you have a shorter amount of time, I would say, to make an impression, which is tough. But there's also the good part about Zooms where people are more likely to do more of them. Before, when we would schedule callbacks, it was a smaller group, I would say, or a bigger deal to get a callback because we have to bring all producers, directors, everyone, schedule a time, find a time all the actors can come into the office, get a reader. Like it was such a bigger ordeal, where now if we do callbacks, like there was a week, I think like 3 weeks on the last pilot I was on, we had a callback every single day that week, but it wasn't for just one role. Like it's just more options. And like, so there's more time, more of a chance, I would say, for you to get in front of the producers and directors. And I think that's a good thing. Even if it seems like there might be more people in the running for roles, I think it's a good thing. And again, it's also nice, you don't have to move anywhere to be there in person, things like that. Like, so I think there's a lot of advantages to things mostly being on Zooms, and things could go back to it. I think it's all going to depend on the production. Some productions, like the producers will want to go and have callbacks or chemistry reads in the room and stuff. But so far, I think it's a lot of advantages, but it's just using that time that when you're on screen, you know, to the best that you can. And like I said before, we have had in the past where people have come on kind of with attitudes or different sorts of things where the, you know, director just didn't quite vibe with them on the Zoom or something. And it, you know, they were like, well, no need to see more type of thing. So, you know, it might be a 3 minutes, but it's important. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. Karuchi, Kyla, what's on your mind?
Hey, you guys answered so many of my questions already, but I was curious in terms of like working, since you guys are, you know, you both do like different things, but in like a similar way for the same big piece. Like, I was wondering like what in conjunction, like how do you guys work together in a way? Like, what do you guys do to like do you find that you know a lot of, like in either way, like knowing a lot of casting directors and knowing a lot of agents and like working together, like how does that play a part, and how can like an actor possibly create relationships like intermixedly, if that makes sense?
Definitely, like that. Most of my inbox is communicating with managers and agents. So, and most of the phone calls I'm a part of, so is people pitching their clients and going to bat for their clients. So I would say it's not void of actors in my inbox as well. So it's, you know, always welcome to email and things. But again, like what ChiChi was saying, like just having someone in your corner, someone that you feel proud to be speaking kind of for you, is just really important. It's also, I think there's a lot of stress. I don't know if this is correct. You might think, you know, differently, but I used to work at Sony Casting, and we would have a lot of people come in after the showcases, and the head of Sony Casting would always tell the students that came in, I think everyone was really, really stressed about getting represented. And she would always tell them, like, it's not a marriage, you know, it is business, it's a relationship, but it's not just once you make a decision on who's representing you, that's it forever. Hopefully it is. And hopefully it's a great relationship, but it's also something I think it's a lot of pressure is put on you like right now. And to just kind of know that there's a lot of good people out there. There's a lot of great people that want to help you and help your career. So just to be really open, I guess, when you're having meetings and things like that, I don't know if that answered your question, but.
I guess with my talent tends to be more diverse. So a lot of times, like I'll actually have cast directors reach out to me sometimes because they're having trouble casting, let's say, a young African-American role, or they also know even outside of my company, I do have a huge network of African-American actors that I know, because I'm just kind of like a mover and shaker in terms of the industry, and at least the theater industry in New York. So I just know a lot of I know a lot of African actors as well. I'm first generation Nigerian, and I produced a festival with my sister called the Now Africa Playwriting Festival. So I just have this network of African actors. I believe Chelsea was casting an episode of Little America, and they actually just hired me to be, I think it was a couple years ago, they hired me to be a casting consultant because I basically was helping them cast Nigerian actors for this one episode of Little America. So with that said, you know, I think us as representation, we're also kind of like problem solvers, right? We're kind of working hand in hand. We're going to help casting look good. They're going to hopefully help us look good with our client. And we're all kind of here to kind of help each other in the industry, you know? So we are kind of working hard. If Katherine releases a breakdown and she's looking for something very specific, I'm looking at my roster, and I'm also trying to figure out, like, okay, who's going to fit the description that Katherine released? You know, I'm not going to just send her random names, because I know before when I worked at some agencies, they would just kind of send everybody. They didn't know that like, no, they're actually being very specific in terms of who they're looking for. You can't just like submit everyone, you have to actually, we also have to have an eye for casting too and representation. Like just because I have, 5 young African-American actors, they might not necessarily have all the same experiences. One guy might be a little bit more corporate feeling. Other guys, he grew up in Southern Georgia, so everyone has a different kind of vibe and energy and spirit. So it's really important that we also do kind of get to know our clients on a personal level and know who's going to actually bring as much truth to the roles that casting releases. So it is important for us to kind of making sure that we're also submitting the right people. Because, I don't know, for whatever reason, sometimes they're those people who will just submit everybody and they're not even paying attention to the breakdown, So I remember even the other day, there was a breakdown that, I don't know, it was so interesting. My client had saw it somewhere. I think it came out on their Actors Access, and they're just like, oh, I want to get submitted for this. But I believe the breakdown was specifically looking for like an amputee. So like, you got to read the breakdown. Like you can't just say, oh, this person, like, no, it actually says you have to be an amputee. So you can't submit for that, So it's like little things in terms of making sure you're reading the full breakdown. You're not just trying to get yourself out there because you just want to be seen, making sure it makes sense. So yeah.
This is fantastic. I think we have time for maybe one more question. Alan, you had your hand up a minute ago. Are you still curious or?
Yeah.
Yeah, fire away, please.
This is for ChiChi. What kind of advice do you give the actors that you're managing to make themselves more marketable?
Ooh, yeah. So here's the thing with the more marketable thing. I think everyone's marketable, right? I personally think it's important. First of all, I think it's important that you know yourself. That's the most important thing in terms of like, do you actually know yourself as a human being? Have you checked in with yourself? Like when you're going in for certain roles, like what are the roles that you're going to be most excited to play? So with that said, I do believe if you know yourself, if you know the roles that you're most excited to go out for, that's how you market yourself. Like, how do we best reflect, hey, I really want to do all these like comedies. I want to do these kind of like buddy films, do you have a headshot that shows that kind of like quirky fun side? Do you have a scene on your acting reel that shows that you're really good with improv and comedy? So with that said, making sure that all your marketing materials best reflect how you see yourself and best reflect your brand. I remember I had one client that, he was tired of going out for the cop, the lawyer, or some type of shady character. But I was like, well, your headshot's very like, kind of like intimidating, serious looking. Like I don't see comedy when I look at your headshot. So he got in new headshots. He recorded some scenes with his friends, some more like improv, fun comedy stuff. And like literally, month or two later, he's going out for more comedies, and he finally got cast in this like indie Billy Crystal film that we added to his reel. So he's going out for a lot more things because we had to make sure that the headshot, there were scenes that best reflect the work that he wanted to be doing, because he was tired of going out for like these kind of like, one-dimensional detective or villain or, dramatic roles, but he wanted to go out for more comedies. So yeah, with that said, just make sure your materials are marketable that are reflecting that. So I definitely think anyone can brand themselves and market themselves well. You just got to really make sure that like whatever you have is showcasing the work that you want to do.
Thank you.
Okay, this has been such an exhilarating 70 minutes. What's leaping out of the screen for me we've talked, aside from, in addition to all of the finer points of how to engage with managers, how to engage with casting directors, what is going on in your mind, which is an invaluable perspective, which we're all curious about when we're auditioning and navigating the industry. I also just get I get a very strong sense of your love for this art form comes across, and like how precious relationships are in this industry. That's what I hear you both referencing over and over again: maintaining good relationships, being a good citizen, respecting boundaries, knowing how to be personable, and knowing how to bring your every part of yourself that you want to bring to an audition. And that that's something I'm going to be carrying with me for a while from this conversation, and I'm just so grateful. This has been exhilarating, man. It's like I just had a couple of cups of coffee. But I'm so grateful to you, Katherine and ChiChi, for joining us tonight after hours on a weekday when you both are extremely busy as well, on the eve of a holiday. And also to the class of 2021, who we just keep underlining. We are so passionate about trying to help y'all find a way into the industry. It's been a grueling year and a half for everybody in theater and the performing arts, but for students especially, it's just rough. And so any way that we can help build that bridge, we really want to do. So that's all I have for tonight. Thank you all. Students, I will ask you to please stick around. We're going to huddle up and talk a little bit about what's coming up on Saturday. But ChiChi and Katherine, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and we are very grateful.
Thank y'all
you
so
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was
Thank you,
so
everyone.
fun.
Thank you.
And
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And I learned the lesson, ChiChi. If there is ever anything we can do to help y'all, please feel free to reach out, and we'll do whatever we can to pay back.
Yeah.
And stay in
definitely.
touch, everyone.
All right.
Thank
Appreciate
Bye.
it.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, that was awesome. Alan, you can stick around if you would like to. We're gonna chat. It was great to have you join us and
Yeah,
pose those great questions. Yeah,
I'm
what's
gonna
up?
head out. Yeah,
Do it, man.
thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna head out. It was nice to meet you.
Later,
Take
everyone.
care.
Bye. Have a good
All right.
night.
Same to
All
you.
right, Sabra, would you like to join us?
Oh, Sabra's, she's been looming?
Yeah, she's here
Hey.
in the background.
Sorry, just checking. Did you mean to keep recording? Just checking.
Oh yeah, let's stop the recording.
Just in case.
Just in case what? What is that supposed
We
to
tell
mean?
secrets.